election day or by absentee in person at the Board of Elections, a voter must submit as proof of ID the following: an Ohio driver's license, a state of Ohio ID, a military ID, or a U.S. passport. Additionally, the photo ID must contain the name of the elector that conforms to the name of the individual's voter registration record, a photograph of the individual to whom the document was issued, and an expiration date, which is not expired or expired after the date of the most recent general election. The bill makes accommodations for those who cannot afford a photo ID by directing the Bureau of Motor Vehicles to promulgate rules on providing free state IDs to persons who qualify based on indigence. Based on research by LSC, there are currently more people in Ohio that are 18 or older that would have the proper ID as required by the bill than there are registered voters in the state. And therefore, any cost associated with the bill, as it pertains to furnishing free ID cards based on indigence, would be minimal. Additionally, the bill allows persons who object for religious reasons to having their photograph taken. They can sign an affidavit of religious objection at the Board of Elections. Finally, unchanged in current law, persons without photo ID may vote absentee by mail. The goal of the Ohio Fair and Secure Elections Act is to ensure the integrity of the elections process and provides a common sense means of combating vote fraud and the perception of vote fraud. Photo ID adds to existing safeguards in the American electoral system, such as advanced registration and residency requirements, to help ensure that elections are fair and honest. Such safeguards act to protect, rather than interfere with, the right to vote. By ensuring these safeguards, the proposed bill encourages citizen confidence and participation in the democratic process. National Wall Street Journal NBC poll conducted in April of 2006 showed that 81% of respondents nationwide supported and only 7% opposed photo ID requirements. The proposal borrows from Indiana and Georgia voter ID laws, both of which have withstood constitutional scrutiny. Crawford versus Marion County Board of Elections, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected a facial challenge to Indiana's voter ID law based on the state's interest in election modernization, preventing voter fraud, and ensuring public confidence in the integrity of the electoral process. The subsequent as-applied state court challenge to Indiana's voter ID law was also rejected. In passing this legislation, Ohio will join the growing number of states that pass and produce voter photo ID laws. 27 other states require voters to present ID prior to voting. 8 states require photo ID, and legislation requiring photo ID is currently pending in 20 other states. Mr. Speaker, thank you again for the opportunity to present testimony on House Bill 159, the Ohio Fair and Secure Election Act, and I urge your support.
The question is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman from Montgomery County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We, the people, have the right to vote without barriers. We have the right to voice our beliefs in democracy, which was founded by public participation. House Bill 159 puts a red C between the people's right to vote in the state of Ohio. Even Moses could not bring the C for the C across. The goal is for every politician and legislator to open every door for the people, not to close them. Suppressing the right to vote is very bad for the people of Ohio. This bill is no different than the time there was poll tax, when requiring people to pay to vote, or when people had no right to vote for president in any ward. In order to vote, they had to tell every street in the United States, every street in the county, even every street in their city, the right to vote. At this time, we must not go back, we must go forward. We must give people the right to vote without showing ID, what's wrong with the bills now? You can show your utility bill, You can show your bank statement. There's been no thing on this today that shows voter fraud in the state of Ohio. Perception, to go through all this bill just so we have a perception of voter fraud, it makes no sense. And I hope, when this bill, if this bill goes through, I hope that our local courts, our common police courts, and the Supreme Court will look at this and say, this is an unjust bill and does not give people the right to vote. So I strongly disagree with this bill and ask everybody to vote no.
The question is, shall the bill pass? The lady representative Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand today to oppose House Bill 59. I believe that House Bill 59 is a solution in search of a problem. There's absolutely zero evidence of voter impersonation fraud to necessitate this legislation. We had our sponsor give us testimony. He was not able to come up with instances of in-person voter impersonation fraud. We had witnesses, the Secretary of State from Georgia, who was not able to come up with a single case in Georgia that necessitated the legislation in the state of Georgia, one of only 2 states that has an ID requirement such as this. And none of the witnesses that I asked in our hearings on this legislation were able to come up with an instance of in-person voter impersonation. So in these difficult financial times for our state, where we face an $8 billion budget gap, unprecedented, we will be spending at least $20 million to impose a poll tax on Ohio voters and to disenfranchise tens of thousands of Ohio voters. That $20 million, you may have some questions about that. In the fiscal note, I would dispute how much they say this will cost, and fiscal notes in other states estimate a much higher cost. That will be both for the issuance of the ID cards to voters that are indigent. That will be for the voter education campaign that will be undoubtedly needed for this drastic change in the law, and also to retrain all of our poll workers across the state in 88 counties and hundreds of precincts on election day. 25% of African American voters, of voting age African Americans, do not possess a government-issued photo ID. 20% of voters age 18 to 24 do not possess a government-issued photo ID. 18% of those who are over the age of 65 do not possess a government-issued photo ID. 15% of those who earn less than $35,000 a year possess one of these IDs. And 10% of the disabled in Ohio do not possess a government-issued photo ID. Clearly, as our colleagues across the aisle have proven time and time again, they don't care about the average Ohioan. They want to treat voting as a privilege for the privileged few rather than as a right. We didn't hear from our Secretary of State, our chief elections official, on this legislation. I think that's a critical flaw in this process. Another critical flaw in the process was having this bill introduced only a week ago and only having one hearing with witnesses given the opportunity to testify. All of our amendments to make this bill better, to make it closer to something that might pass constitutional muster, were immediately tabled after offered. I urge the members of this legislature to oppose House Bill 159.
Thank you. The question is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman from Mahoning County. I appreciate that. You not only have bad eyesight, I couldn't hear you.
I can't hear it very well, but I hope that the sponsor of the bill will be subject to a question. I'm going to make up the question.
The gentleman yields the question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Blessing. Looking over the bill, I noticed that during the hearing, the very quick hearing, that didn't come up with any testimony relative to anyone actually breaking the law or coming into a polling booth without using it and voting twice. But having said that, I really want you to answer this question. How do you define indigent?
The gentleman may respond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Hagan. It's defined in the code. We have indigent affidavits all the time in court. People that can afford anything. And generally, anybody that will show up and say they're indigent, they're probably going to get a state ID. I'd be surprised if they didn't. Second of all, there was an instance in Hamilton County where a person voted twice. The one we know of, because the man had put down the Board of Elections during the hearing on election contest that was down there and admitted to doing it. But that's the only way they found out. So, yeah, there has been examples of it.
Gentleman, Mr. Hagan.
I have another question.
The gentleman has a second question. Does the gentleman yield? The gentleman yield.
Thank you. Let me refer to the fiscal note here, Mr. Speaker and Representative Blessing. It appears that there is a minimum of $98,040 in potential BMV costs. But that doesn't take into consideration that they would have to actually advertise for this, that they'd have to do their due diligence in making sure people are available. So would there be additional cost to this as well?
The gentleman may answer directly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hagan, I generally don't tell LLC how to do their job. I assume they do it correct. If you raised that question with them prior to now, perhaps they could have corrected it if it was a problem, but I'm not sure if it was a problem.
Please, Madam Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Rule 72 of the Ohio House Rules, I move to have House Bill 159 to be recommitted to the Finance and Appropriations Committee because there is a fiscal impact.
The question is, shall the... Oh, yeah. But the question before the House is, shall the motion to re-refer be agreed to? The House will prepare and proceed to vote. Have all members now voted? The clerk will take the roll. 37 yeas, 57 nays. The motion to re-refer is not agreed to. The question is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman, Mr. London.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today because this is a very sad day for Ohio. In fact, today, Columbus, Ohio seems to feel a little bit more like Georgia or Mississippi, Alabama. With House Bill 159, we are going to impose a modern-day poll tax in Ohio. That's right, voters actually will be forced to make some type of payment in order to exercise their right to vote. Now, I know we like to be first in a lot of things, but we can't take credit for being the first state to initiate a poll tax. The state of Georgia already beat us to that. That was way back in the late 1800s. In committee, during the all-encompassing one-day hearing, we heard from the Secretary of State for the state of Georgia. Yes, that Georgia, the same state that helped to originate the concept of a poll tax in the late 1800s. But now it's over 140 years later, and Georgia wants Ohio to adopt what I guess they see as a new and improved modern-day poll tax. I mean, if it's good enough for Georgia, it certainly must be good enough for Ohio, right? Also in committee, in support of House Bill 159, we heard from the Deputy Secretary of State for the state of Indiana. He was there to speak on behalf of Indiana Secretary of State Charles White. I guess Secretary White wanted to make sure that we knew that Indiana's photo ID requirement would actually address the concerns the supporters of this bill have about voter fraud. However, Secretary White of Indiana has a credibility problem these days. Since this month, Mr. White was indicted on 7 felony counts, including voter fraud. You heard me right, voter fraud. So we heard from the Secretary of State from Georgia and the Secretary of State from Indiana. But the last time I checked, this is actually an Ohio bill. So wouldn't it make sense to hear from our own Secretary of State, John Husted? Now, despite several requests by members of the committee, to the committee chair to actually hear from Secretary Husted, we voted that bill out without ever hearing from our own Secretary of State. That seems odd to me. Ohio must not, I repeat, must not disenfranchise even one eligible voter who doesn't have a current government-issued photo ID. Let's just call House Bill 159 what it really is. It's a poll tax for Ohioans, for students, indigent, elderly, disabled, and minority members of our communities who want to vote. This is a sad day in Ohio history.
Gentleman, Mr. Solazzi of Lucas County.
Thank you, Speaker. I too stand with great concern over not just the impact of House Bill 159, but the process leading to its passage as well. As has been stated, there are few, if any, instances of voter impersonation fraud in the state of Ohio. Does this fact justify passage of the country's most onerous requirements for what is considered one of our most precious and sacred rights? Given that 25% of voting age African Americans, as has been stated by my colleague Representative Klein, don't have a government-issued photo ID, it's clear this creates hurdles that don't currently exist. Nor does it take a rocket scientist to determine that folks most negatively impacted by this bill, minorities, elderly poor, disabled, those making less than $35,000 a year, college kids, typically and consistently vote for Democrats. Manipulation of the state's election laws to effectuate a predetermined outcome at the polls represents the worst this chamber has to offer. To do so in a way that is tantamount to under the cover of darkness, within 1 week of introduction, makes it even worse. How does this help ensure confidence in the election process? How does this help ensure confidence in our government? I strongly urge a no vote on this unnecessary and unwarranted bill.
Question is, shall the bill pass? Gentleman, Mr. Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, democracy is the social compact that keeps us from anarchy. This ingenious and most important dynamic of democracy is that it requests and indeed it requires the consent of the government. An academic born 1,000 years ago might view democracy as a diabolical scheme to conscript the government into thinking that they are part of the government and part of the solution. But it works and they are. No other nation in history can boast of the breadth and length of our success in democratic governance. Our overarching history has been one in which we have expanded the franchise, including more and more people as part of this democratic experiment, adding non-landowners, people of lesser wealth, women, African Americans, younger voters, working voters who cannot vote on election day, and homebound voters. Despite our larger trajectory toward inclusion, our history is sadly replete with occasions when elite groups who thought they knew best sought to restrict participation. The post-Civil War era, the suffrage movement, the 1950s and 1960s, civil rights movements constitute some of the darkest hours that we find almost incomprehensible today. Now, everyone can make a mistake in voting, and they can have buyer's remorse. Just ask a teacher who wanted 2 more snow days. But we have faith as a democracy populated by always fallible people. We have faith in the collective wisdom and collective action. Still, we have occasional suspicions about relying on decision-making abilities of certain elements of society. How can such people be trusted to understand? Some whisper. Others ask, have they done their homework? Do they really know the issues of the candidates? Still others resent the fact that the poor and the uneducated, or the less wealthy and the less worldly, have power over the educated and prosperous few who are critical to our economy and so important to wealth and job creation. I accuse no one here of entertaining such base and anti-democratic thoughts, but we all know that this debate occurs in our communities every day. If HB 159 were supported by any evidence of election day fraud, then I could understand the legitimacy of our conversation today. But the complete and utter absence of evidence means that the legislation is gasoline on the fire of elitist prejudice. What it really says is that while we will pay lip service to broad democratic participation, those people, and we can throw almost anyone we wish into this lot, those people should not be trusted to make decisions for the rest of us. The diabolical genius of democracy is that we make everyone a partner and a stakeholder. We have all heard the old saw that if you're not part of the solution, then you're part of the problem. This legislation says to those people, to the wrong people, that they are the problem, and that their participation in crafting solutions is neither worthy nor welcome. Today we are telling the young, the old, the poor, and the dark-skinned that we have lost confidence in their ability to vision the future of Ohio. The supporters of HB 59 should take little comfort in the fractured decision rendered by the United States Supreme Court in Crawford versus Marion County Board of Elections. Reading the several decisions together, it is clear that the court placed heavy reliance on 2 facts not present here. First, Indiana's voter records were a demonstrable mess. In contrast, Ohio was invested heavily in improving the quality of its voter rolls. The second fact present in Crawford and starkly absent here is a constitutional escape hatch, namely the ability to easily obtain a free photo ID, here replaced by the requirement to either pay for an ID or to carry the undefined burden of proving indigency. It is also safe to say that the Crawford court invited an as-applied challenge to the legislation and all but wrote the trial plan for those who will surely prevail in a judicial challenge to this legislation. Perhaps the knowledge that this legislation will be corrected by the courts provides the courage necessary to vote in favor of this bill. But if that is the case, I respectfully submit that that is the courage of a drunken man who later comes to deeply regret his conduct. I plead with my colleagues to reconsider this legislation. The majority is large and ambitious. I understand that. But this is not the legacy that you want. It is antithetical to our shared history and our burden of preserving democracy by expanding voter participation. Kevin Phillips is one of the greatest thinkers of the Republican Party. In 1969, he authored a blueprint effectively utilized by the National Party. That classic was entitled The Coming Republican Majority. In the years since, he has been a prolific writer at the intersection of politics, economics, and history. His writings have grown increasingly alarmed about the dominance of money in American governance, to the point that he wonders aloud about our ability to move forward. The Citizens United decision last year was a terrible blow to true democratic participation. What the public takes away from that case, in essence, is that while you average voters out there still count, those who have money count more. Polls show that the public gets it, they understand it. What this legislation is saying to them is that some people now don't count at all. Caretaking of democracy is entrusted to all of us. There is no one, perhaps save the courts, who can bail us out if we fail. But we should not count on the courts, since it is in fact our oath that binds us to this end. If one is privileged and fortunate and blessed, you will find yourself living in a moment when you can stand up for democracy and preserve the accomplishments of all those who came before us and honor the sacrifices of those who fought and died for the right to vote. This is one of those moments. I urge caution, I urge reflection, and I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Gentleman, Mr. Mecklenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, on a couple of procedural kind of matters. This bill, when you look at it, is not terribly complicated. At least in the sense that it deals with one issue. Photo identification at polls or in-person early voting. We could have had hearings in committee 100 hours. Vote would change. As it was, we had 6 hours plus of hearings, and the minority was offered the same advantage as the majority. And that's one of the goals of this bill, by the way, is to treat everyone equally. They had witnesses coming from Washington, D.C. via Skype. They had witnesses coming from St. Louis via Skype. Tremendous use of our technology here. Explained to the representatives over the weekend that this technology was available. Please use it. They did. We used it with respect to the Secretary of State of Georgia. With respect to the issues involving our Secretary of State, let's just briefly touch on that. You can recall the last General Assembly, there were many times those of us, most of the members on state government elections were not on the elections committee last year, where Secretary of State Brewer did not appear on bills. I recall a bill that was to amend the Constitution to greatly infringe upon the rights of referendum. And then there was a handwritten amendment that said, oh, by the way, we need initiative too, even though there are totally different requirements for initiatives and referendums. This was done after about 30 minutes of hearing. It was brought to the floor, and the Secretary of State did not testify one way or another. And that was a bill. That was a bill. May I remind you, it was supported by every single Democrat to infringe upon the constitutional rights in effect since 1910 with respect to the voters of the state of Ohio to engage in the initiative process. Those of you that were here last time will remember that. There were other type bills that came out of nowhere on that committee. There was a bill, so-called partisan bill with respect to redistricting. That sat not nowhere. There were hearings on it, okay, never brought to the floor. It wasn't brought to the floor until after the election. After the election, then all of a sudden, your side of the aisle decided to get all good government. We need to reform the redistricting process. Out of the blue, we wake up one day and there it is on the floor. I know. And furthermore, let's look at the type of witnesses that were testifying. They came from think tanks, well and good. Think tanks can provide some valuable resources, but it was the same thing. And you could have brought in 100 such witnesses. We could have brought in 100 such witnesses. You can make the numbers sing anything you want to say. That's what think tanks do a lot of times. It wouldn't have changed the vote, and it wouldn't have changed the testimony before the committee. So each and every one of us knew what we were doing. One of the newspapers, right after it was introduced, came out and said, we don't like it. Well, gosh, they sure came to a conclusion pretty quick on a simple thing, didn't they? Those are some of the amendments. Let's look at undercurrent of what's really going on your side of the wall. References are made to grandfathering, references are made to recording devices that are being utilized. We're not accusing you guys over there of that. No, no, no. of Georgia. Let's look at the facts. The state of Georgia, maybe we could learn something about relations. In 2006, African-American voters. In 2008, after our OID bill passed, 1.2 million
They're going to vote on that, and they're going to... What's wrong?
Yes,
Huh?
I was taping for the last 30 minutes.
Oh,
Just
were
to watch the security guys kept looking at them.
You told me to put my
Massive bullshit. I want to sit in there and listen.
I was holding it really tight.
I know.
I'll
I was
post
getting
it.
so pissed off though during that.
We're not going to see Connie, we're just going to see her aide.
Yeah. It's going to pass.
You gentlemen mind being on my YouTube page? Yeah? YouTube? Yeah, YouTube. YouTube, you know what that is? Yeah. Mind being on there? No. Don't put you on there, okay? That's why I asked. Melinda doesn't mind. I had to be real careful, which all you guys, that's why it had to go in my hat for a little while.
All right, let's all go to the right center.
How's it going? So far, so good.
Have you changed any votes yet, ladies?
Well, we just got out of this session. We haven't done any.
We had to go see Representative Pillage here in a few minutes, so we didn't get a chance to see that vote. But I'll post it in the comment section.
Huh?
Oh no, I was talking to the camera.
That's what I thought you were. But then, okay.
I was narrating. Oh good, it's not raining.
Is it technical, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Civil disobedience.
No, well, I'm saying what, you know.
Bill knows all about that, huh? He's the one that usually takes the heat.
Yeah, but you'll be out of town like a house clothes.
The bright ones. Well, I know you guys are very
go underground?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why we came out here. Last time I went downstairs.
Stand up on this ledge. He's gonna get pictures. We're on the grass, baby.
Picture time. Oh, wait. Tell you what, we're 36 minutes. We're gonna end this.